Welcome to Sunday Night Prime. I'm Father Andew Aposotoli, a member of the Franciscan Friars of the Renewal, and it's my pleasure to be your host for this very special program. Before we get into it, though, let me remind you that if you have any questions or comments and suggestions for programs, please send your emails to sundaynightprime@EWTN.com. sundaynightprime@EWTN.com. It's a very special program because I'm sure that you as viewers, maybe members of the EWTN family, friends certainly, have heard the sad news of the death of Father Benedict Joseph Groeschel. He died on the evening of October the 3rd, which very significantly was the same time that St. Francis died. Of course, he died back in 1226. And that evening, we were, as Franciscans, were celebrating a service we call the Transitus, passing over. We commemorate the death of St. Francis passing from this life into eternal life. And so Father Benedict, as a good Franciscan, God chose to call him at that very time. And the last thing that I'd heard from one of the brothers who was caring for him was that he said the rosary with Mother Angelica through EWTN. After that, he fell asleep and he died. He died very peacefully. So we're going to present a special program. We're calling it A Tribute to Father Benedict Joseph Groeschel. Before we get into that, I also want to mention another special thing about this program. Today we have a live audience. We have many friars and sisters, and we're very privileged to have two of the little sisters of the poor who took care of Father Benedict at their home in Totowa, New Jersey. We have Mother Gertrude and Sister Raymond. Thank you. We're very happy to have you and privileged to have you in the audience. Thank you for the wonderful care you gave Father Benedict. We also have Brother Simon, Brother Rufino, and Brother Innocent. They also had been very helpful to Father Benedict, many of the brothers taking turns to take good care of Father Benedict. He never felt alone. I think that's very important to say. Well, what we decided to do was to do a program so that we could share Father Benedict as we knew him. We were a part of his community. We were part of his family in a very, very genuine, real way. So we'd like to be sharing, and we'd start off. I'd like to introduce our guest tonight, first, at least for the first part, Father Glenn Sedano, who is one of the founding members of the Franciscan Friars of the Renewal. And also we have Father John Paul, who is presently our servant or superior of our community. So welcome. So it's certainly a very wonderful opportunity to share about Father Benedict. In fact, maybe we could each share a little bit about how we first came to know him and met him. Well, for myself, I was a Capuchin Franciscan belonging to a different province or region than Father Benedict. He was a Capuchin in the New York, New England region. I was in the New Jersey region. And I had heard, even when I was a young brother, all about this famous Brother Benedict at the time, you know. And I never met him, but I always knew about him. People talk so highly about him. When I got transferred, after I was ordained, I spent some years teaching in a high school seminary in New Jersey. Then I went up to Beacon, New York. And in New York, I heard a lot more about Father Benedict Groeschel. In fact, people told me, you look like him. You sound like him. You even say the same things that Father Benedict says. I said, I've got to meet this Father Benedict, you know. But, you know, so many people have thought I look like Father Benedict. Even Mother Teresa of Calcutta. I was standing in her convent all alone in this one room. She walked in and she took a quick look at me. She says, Father Benedict, how are you? I said, Mother, it's not Father Benedict, it's Father Andrew. And she says, Father Andrew, you look like Father Benedict. But he was a wonderful person to meet. I finally met him when he was giving a course on to priest confessors. In other words, how to be a good confessor, and give us tremendous insights. I was just taken with him. You know, most of the time you were laughing with all the examples that he would give and stories he would tell. It was just wonderful. Then later on, in 1984, he got very sick, and he asked me to come and do a retreat for him in 1984, to do a retreat for him, a priest retreat. And I had never done a priest retreat. So I was kind of nervous, and especially when I found out there were 104 priests and 2 bishops. And I remember these people, this was all the priests of the Diocese of Wilmington, Delaware. They had waited 3 years to have this retreat with Father Benedict Groeschel. See, every 3rd year, they had to go on retreat with the bishop of the diocese. The other 2 years, they could go on retreat wherever they wanted. Well, this was the 3rd year. They had waited so long for Father Benedict, and 2 weeks before the retreat, he got the bypass surgery, and he asked me to go. And I said to myself, I've got to tell these priests I am not Father Benedict Groeschel. So I told them there are 2 groups of retreat directors. The first group is the who's who. I said, these are the ones, they write books, they make tapes, and you wait 3 years to get them. Father Groeschel is in the who's who. The other group is who's that? And I said, I'll bet you got a letter from your bishop or the chancery saying, well, Father Groeschel can't make it. We're going to have Father Andew Aposotoli. Your first question was, who's that? Well, after that retreat, I went to work with Father Benedict at the retreat house where he was stationed. He was asked by Cardinal Cook to open a retreat house for priests and seminarians. So I went to work with him in 1985, and about 2 years later, a number of friars were thinking about beginning a renewal, which was something that Pope John Paul II was calling upon all religious to renew their communities. And ever since then, I worked with him, became part of the new community with him, and he had an enormous impact on my life. But maybe Father Glenn, who certainly knew him very well, would like to share his.
Well, I met Father Benedict, it was 1975, and I just had finished graduating college. I myself was going through a spiritual renewal and looking for a place where I could grow in my faith, and I found a charismatic prayer group. And I went to this charismatic prayer group, and there was 4 young men that showed up, and all of them turned out to be seminarians. And when they told me that they were seminarians, and I said, you mean you're becoming priests? And they said, yes. I said, I don't think anyone was doing that anymore, And well, anyway, they told me about Father Benedict. And sometime later, I went to that seminary where they went to, because he was giving a talk. And I heard Father Benedict preach for the first time, and I knew that I had met someone very, very special. And it was his sincerity, his verve, his deep spirituality, and his fervor. And so I got to know Father Benedict a little bit. I introduced myself, and at that time, he was making his sort of inroads into television. And so I was a communication arts major and graduated the year before. I told him I could help produce whatever shows that he was doing, and he needed that help. So I helped to do some of the production of the first shows on a show called Contemporary Catholic. And so I helped Father Benedict do that, and got to know him more. And in time, I left CBS, where I was working, and I went to Trinity Retreat, the retreat house that you referred to. I lived there for a year while teaching high school, and the following year, I too joined the Capuchins. And so obviously he made a great impact on my life, and continued to for many years into the future.
Our other guest, Father John Paul, who is our servant for our community. Father, would you want to share your first encounter with Father, or how you at least come to know him?
Sure. I was actually I was in the midst of a spiritual renewal as well, and I was serving with a mission team based out of the Twin Cities in Minnesota. And one of the friars here, another one of the friars was serving there, and he gave me Father Benedict's book. I had never heard of Father Benedict up until that point, and this was in '93. So I'm of a younger set here. So I read the book, and I told my spiritual director at that point that this was, someone had given me this book, and I called up, and Father Glenn was the vocation director at that point, and then at that point, Father Andrew, you were also the community servant. So here we are, a new generation. But it's through Father Benedict and being so well known already at that point throughout the United States that my spiritual director at that point, he was a Carmelite, but he suggested that I come out and visit the community here in New York, originally from the west of the United States in Nevada. And it was a frightening thing to come to New York at that point. But when I came, it was a wonderful experience. But it was more through the influence of Father Benedict out in the larger church that I came to know of the community, because it wasn't even 10 years old at that point.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're very blessed. Yes, you can see how much Father Benedict, the great influence that he's had in so many, many lives. Everywhere I go, in preaching, the first question you get is, how's Father Benedict? How's Father? Sometimes people come walking up to me and they shake my hand and they don't even say hello to me. They say, how's Father Benedict? So, but that's kind of significant for the impact he's had on so many lives. So many people love him.
If I could say this, everywhere I went, people always say hello to Father Benedict. And everywhere I went, and I traveled a lot, so to fulfill my promise, once a month or so when I saw him, I would say, Father Benedict, the world says hello. That's it. It was one hello for everybody.
That's great. Yeah. Well, one of the titles, our friars have put together a little prayer card for in remembrance of Father Benedict. And we'll be talking a little bit about this a little bit later, that you will be able to get information on how to get this from our website, which is franciscanfriars.com. Okay, and then you push the button that says contact us, and you'll get information how you can get this wonderful card with a picture of Father Benedict. And on the back it lists what we consider like 4 main characteristics of his life, how we would describe him: a faithful son of the church, a loving father of the poor, an ardent preacher of the gospel, and a dedicated follower of St. Francis. And of course, it's as a great follower of St. Francis that we were influenced, in community life. I know he was listening to the Holy Father at the time, Pope John Paul, saying, each community should be renewing itself. And he really took that very seriously. I know he loved the poor. He led there were 8 of us in that beginning, to begin that work. Do you have any favorite stories you might like to share? I know sometimes it's not always easy to come up with a good story, but
in 1998, Father Benedict took a group of the friars to the Holy Land, and it was quite an experience. I was able to just jump on because one of the older friars in seniority had a previous engagement, so I was able to take his place. But one of the influences that Father Benedict really had upon me was his reliance on divine providence. So someone had paid for us to go, but we had to bring our sleeping bags because we would sleep on the floor in different places wherever we landed for that night. We would stay. And all the other pilgrims on the trip, Father Benedict would go, okay, brothers, go and talk to the people and I'll tell them, you pick a friar and you take him to dinner. And so we had to go and sit with different people that we didn't know, but he kind of had providence that way. And another thing similar to that was he took a pilgrimage to England when I was stationed in London. We were in the East End, nothing to see in the East End of London at that point. Now the Olympics were there. But he came and took a tour bus to our little friary and had people come out, and we had a mass in our chapel for all the pilgrims that he was leading around England. And then he took up a collection so that we could get portable basketball poles for the kids in the neighborhood. And it was just his reliance on divine providence really has left a great influence. And yeah, God provides.
Yes, he does, certainly. Yeah, and Father was so dedicated, in everything that he did. I remember when I went to work with him, I was startled one day. He said to me, Father Andrew, today we're going to either have a 3-ring circus day, a roller skate day, or a bilocation day. So take your choice. But that was Father Benedict. I think he did the work of 5 priests in one day. He just did so much. He had that great dedication and I know touching many people, but especially for our renewal, we really owe to him. There were 8 of us in the beginning, but he was the one who had the vision, and he was the one who had the determination that we must accomplish what God has pointed out to us. I remember after we began, we went to see Mother Teresa. She wanted to know what we were doing. And when we told her what we felt, and Father Benedict knew her so very well, she said to us, well, once you uncover something of the will of God, you have to remain faithful to it. And he was faithful right to the end. Well, Father, so everyone, we're going to have to take a little break now, but don't go away. We've got so much more to share with you. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Sunday Night Prime. I'm Father Andew Aposotoli, your host for today's program, and it's a very special one entitled A Tribute to Father Benedict Joseph Groeschel. You've already met one of our guests, Father Glenn Sedano, who was on the first part of our program, and now we have someone else in the second part, and that's Brother Sean. Brother Sean, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Father Andrew. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, it was a real pleasure to have you. Brother, you were with Father Benedict when he died. Could you share a little bit about that?
Yes, well, I was on the team, as you mentioned before, a rotating team of brothers who cared for Father Benedict, and just so happened that I was working with him on the 3rd of October, and he had a kind of a rough day that day. Throughout most of the day, he was in a lot of pain, but toward the end of the night, I was the only one there with him, and I decided nice idea if we prayed the rosary together. And he was conscious at this time. It's about 9:30 at night. He always prayed the rosary with Mother Angelica on EWTN. And so he said yes, sure, nodded his head. So we prayed the rosary. At the end of that, I just got up and I noticed that he wasn't responding to anything. He had his eyes open, his mouth was open. He was going into these little trances quite often in the last couple weeks of his life. So I didn't think too much about it. But I did try to take his pulse. I couldn't find anything, couldn't really see him breathing too much. But I asked him a couple times his name, and he didn't respond. But he did finally move his eyes and his mouth, and I thought, well, okay, maybe he's just sleeping and going into one of these little trances for a moment. And I was with him all day. I went to lie down a little bit, and it was a few minutes later that the nurse came in and said he's gone. So I think he was actually dying at that moment, and I'd like to think that he died right after the rosary. It was certainly the last conscious thing that he did on earth, and I thought that was a very consoling and beautiful way to go.
Yeah, yeah. He had a visitor too. I think, Father Glenn, were you going to say something on that, or was it you had mentioned?
Well, he had a number of visitors always when you were there, but the last day it was just very interesting that the gentleman came in who had been cured of blindness from the Blessed Miriam Teresa, who was beatified in Newark on the Feast of St. Francis. So it was going to be the very next day. He actually came in with a small group to visit him, brought the relic of Blessed Miriam, and Father Benedict blessed himself with it. And I thought that was very, very moving too, because both of them, Father Benedict and Blessed Miriam, were both born in Bayonne, New Jersey. So there was a great connection there, and sure enough, that was the night Father Benedict went home to God as well. So very moving and profound.
Right on the vigil, right? St. Francis, and on the vigil of the beatification of Sister Miriam Teresa Demjanovic. Well, it's two Bayonnites are in heaven, I'm sure. Well, we hope that Father Benedict has already gotten there. You know, he always wanted to, remember, he always used to say he wanted to go to purgatory. He couldn't wait to get to purgatory. I said a prayer for him. I prayed Mass that day on the Feast of St. Francis, and I said, Father Benedict, I'm going to pray for you, but I'm not going to do what you said. I'm going to pray that you go straight to heaven. You know, so I know how much you want to go to purgatory. Remember, you used to say, "I'll spend my purgatory reading my books," or something like that.
Drinking bubblegum soda, eating Twinkies. But I think the brothers who worked with him can attest that the last 2 years of his life, and especially the last month, most particularly, it seemed like he was doing his purgatory right there in front of you, at a front row seat, witnessing that. Because he really suffered and really just did a lot of time, I think, off purgatory, and it seemed like on earth.
I'm sure many of the viewers remember when he got hit by the car that time. That was about 10 years ago,
10 years,
wasn't it? And then just about, 3 weeks, 4 weeks before he died, he had that fall and fractured his elbow and his shoulder. So he was in extreme pain there. You know, he did say at one time, he told me one time, he said, I prayed to God that I would be able to suffer some great suffering before I died so that I could give a good example to people. So, you know, that seems to be the way God answered that prayer. Well, Brother Sean, you didn't have a chance to share with us how you had first met Father Benedict.
Well, it was similar to Father John Paul. Soon after my reawakening in the faith in 1991, a friend of mine had given me a book called God and Us by this preacher, unknown preacher to me, Father Benedict Groeschel. And I said, well, this is nice. I was really into anything that was about God at that point. And nice little picture of him inside. He looked so calm and so serene and so gentle. So I thought, this looks like a nice, good book. And it was a good book. It was fine. And I happened to be reading that book when I was went to a vocation weekend at the seminary right here, St. Joseph's in Yonkers. And a young man named Dave Burns came up to me and said, you know, I lived with him. And I said, I lived with him. That's strange. He was a priest. And he explained to me about Trinity Retreat and how David was a volunteer there. And so we got into a conversation about that. And so I found out a little bit more about Father Benedict. And he actually gave me his schedule, for his preaching schedule, for his monthly days of recollection, which he used to do in New York. And so I decided I'll go to that. What the heck? And I went there, and from the moment Father Benedict opened his mouth, I was riveted. And he had that incredible gift, like you talked about, the incredible gift of preaching and really holding on to a crowd through the whole time he was preaching. And I was just hooked, and I couldn't wait to buy his tapes and get back to the next time. And that was my introduction to not just to Father Benedict, but also the friars. And sometime later, I went up to him and said, I think I have a vocation. And he got me in touch with Father Glenn, who was a vocation director. And so I went to see Father Glenn, and that was it after that. So it was Father Benedict who really led me in to the friars and had an incredible impact on my life.
Yeah, he was a real leader too, wasn't he? You know. Well, you know, one other thing, I know his preaching, we're going to talk about that, but I thought right now maybe we could, one of those titles I read before was The Loving Father of the Poor, you know, and certainly he had great works with the poor, you know, the shelters, you know, Padre Pio shelter, and we started that shelter, was in that first year that we were in existence, wasn't it? 2 days before Christmas.
It's one thing that he always emphasized, you know, of the care for the poor. Care for the poor was always his, if you will, his mantra, his anthem in life, you know, and not only he didn't simply just talk about it, he did it. And I remember when we had a discussion one time of whether we should, because we just began and just a handful of us in the South Bronx, and there was a whole lot of work to do. The thought came up whether we should postpone about opening up the shelter for a year. Well, Father Benedict did not like Father Benedict did not like that idea at all. He wanted to dig right in and go to it, and I thought it would also, he thought it would validate our existence by our doing what we said we were supposed to do. But not just that, he just loved the poor, minorities, African Americans, children. Especially every year we would have the Thanksgiving, the drive, and give the food out, and there would be barriers, and the people have to stand behind because there were so many people, and he just went around the crowd and speaking to each one of the people, and every poor person that he spoke to, they felt cared for and respected, and no matter where we are, no matter where I traveled with him, even if it was in a fancy place like a hotel, he would pay attention to the help, you know, the people that no one ever pays attention to, the maid who's cleaning the room, the person who's answering the door. He always made them feel something special because he knew they were special. That's right. People, they didn't even thought they were special. Certainly other people didn't think they were special. He knew that they were special, and they felt it.
Yeah, the works of mercy.
Yeah.
He did them tremendous there, you know, and. Well, with the Padre Pio shelter, went on for almost 30 years. And then now we got the St. Anthony shelter, which is even bigger, you know. So great work of charity. I remember when he started that, he was very insistent that we had to start our work with the poor. Yeah, you remember you had shared with me too before the program Father Glenn, about his work at Children's Village. You might want to say a little bit on that?
Yeah, I believe he was in Children's Village at least 11 years, even more. And this Children's Village is was a facility for a home for orphans, basically. And he was there. There was a chapel there, and he was, of course, the chaplain for the Catholic boys of that group. And he always had a brother with him. I remember Brother Timothy worked with him for a number of years, and he said it was the happiest years of his life. It was working with the orphans. So, and now these very people have remained in contact with him, married men and actually women, because I think young girls actually began going to Children's Village, and now they have children, and they've remained faithful to Father Benedict to this very day.
And great impact, yes, over the course of the years of the community. You meet a lot of those people. They come back to say hello to him, and you know, he, even after he couldn't do the work himself, remember, he would always try to arrange that some of the friars or some other priest or someone could go in and minister to these young people. Yeah, he had that great love.
Yeah, no one was forgotten.
You know, we also wanted to mention, too, that he was a great preacher of the gospel. You were mentioning before, Brother Sean, of how listening to him, how you were taken with him. He kind of, you know, some priest told me, he said, you know, he says, after Bishop Fulton, he says, I think that Father Benedict Groeschel was probably the most outstanding preacher that we've had in the late part of the 20th century, you know, and great man. Well, you know, also a great author of books.
Yep.
Somebody told me, then he had about 35 books or something?
47, I believe.
47?
I think it was. Yeah.
Some of them translated even into Japanese.
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah, that's amazing. Huh? You know, a couple of them that stand out, that Spiritual Passages and Arise from Darkness. We have that right on the screen there. Arise from Darkness. Many people have told me they read that book, and it's a book that was written to lift people out of trials and you know, depression and sadness and overwhelming grief. Many people found great consolation and hope. You know, just as the title says, you arise from that darkness. But he also had that, remember he had that book, Spiritual Passages. I saw where he was awarded a degree from a Catholic magazine that dealt with Catholic psychology and so on. They awarded his book to be the most prominent book of the year, in that particular year. And he was able, this is part of the genius I think that he had, he was able to blend traditional Catholic spirituality, going all the way back to the fathers of the church. Remember, he used to say, when we used to, I'd be amazed at how he would remember names, and he would say, as long as they were before 1500. He always remembered all those names. But he would go back to the fathers of the church, and he was able to take, like, the three ways, the teaching on the three ways, and blend it with modern psychology, which is not easy. You know, but
But Father Andrew, he did that with many things. He was able to, he integrated everything. That's why, you know, they said that St. Francis was a truly Catholic and apostolic man. And I think with Father Benedict, he was very Catholic in that idea. So if you were charismatic or you like traditional Latin, you know, he did not see any problem between the two. He was able to integrate and put everything together in one, all the pieces of a puzzle, he put it in together. And well, a lot of people have difficulty doing that. They either favor one or they put aside the other. He was able to see the value in everything good.
It wasn't amazing anything you asked him about, you know. He'd always give you something. I don't know, we got a few more minutes in this segment, but is any, maybe a story or maybe someone want to share?
I'm sure Brother Sean has one.
A few. I had the great privilege of being able to work closely with Father Benedict on a number of different projects. First, he was in charge of the youth program officially, and I was running, that was my first assignment, and got to work with him there. It was very, very good. But also another time, an interesting project that I got kind of roped into with him was his retreat house up in Monticello, New York, very generous woman had donated land to us, and we had to get it going. And it was right after I made my final vows as a friar. And I was at the first chapter meeting, community chapter, the community meeting where the final professed brothers get together. And Father Benedict raised his hand and he said, "Now we've got this retreat house up in Monticello, and I'm not going to need an assistant to help me with this. And I nominate Brother Sean. He's from upstate New York. He knows how to deal with these people." I said, that was my qualifications. But it turned out to be wonderful because I spent a lot of time with him, driving around with him, and it was me and him many times, and it was a wonderful experience. And he was a tireless worker as well. It was incredible. And one last thing I thought was quite funny. One time I picked him up at the airport, and he was just dead tired, and driving him from Newark all the way to Larchmont, where he was living, and he was slumped in the chair. He was sleeping almost the whole way. I couldn't converse with him. He was so tired, wherever he was from. We got back to Trinity Retreat House, and we drove up to his little place. He didn't live at Trinity, as many people know. He lived in the back of a garage at Trinity, a very poor place. But as we drove into the parking lot, there were a couple silhouetted people you could see inside there. Were doing something inside. And he kind of woke up and he looked at him and he said, "There they are, waiting to crucify me." You know? He had a real sense of humor, real down to earth. He was very, very human, extremely intelligent and wonderfully holy, but so human as well.
Oh yes, oh yes. He was really genuine. He was through and through, and I think that's what attracted so many people. They loved him, and he was very fatherly, you know, in so many ways. Well, we've come to the end of this particular part of our program. We're going to have to take a little break now, but please don't go away. We've got a lot more to share with you. Wonderful things coming your way. Welcome back to Sunday Night Prime. I'm Father Andew Aposotoli, your host for today's program, a very special one entitled A Tribute to Father Benedict Joseph Groeschel. And you've been hearing some of the friars talking. Now we've got a very special guest, the sister. You know, we have not only the friars of the renewal, but we have the Franciscan sisters of the renewal. So, this is Sister Lucille Catrone. She is the community servant for the Franciscan Sisters of the Renewal. Sister, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Okay.
Nice to be here.
It's always a pleasure to have the friars and sisters, you know, speaking and sharing about their life. Well, you know, would you want to share, Sister Lucille, you know, when you first met Father Benedict, you know?
Father, I met Father Benedict actually through, I think he was heading up the group Spiritual Development for the Archdiocese. And at that time, I had just had a conversion experience. It was about 1978 when things were a little bit shaky, you know, within the church and the teachings of the church. And I had a really profound experience and a real conversion. And I did get involved in a charismatic prayer group, but I was looking for sound teaching. And then there was a brother, I was living in Park Slope in Brooklyn, and there was a brother there that had told me that there was a really good teacher, Father Benedict Groeschel, that was giving a course on spiritual development in Manhattan at the Capuchin Church, St. John's on 31st Street. And so I went there and got involved in that teaching and got involved with, the whole group there we had a prayer group there, got involved with him. So from that, really sound teaching, but really also very entertaining teaching. I remember one time Father Benedict was telling us, in between everything else, he was saying, you know, if I ever faint or if I ever pass out, there's only one thing you have to do, just take a microphone, place it in front of me, and I'll come out, you know, immediately, you know, come back to life. And he did that. He had the mic a lot, but he had a lot of other things that really helped us. From that prayer meeting, from the spiritual development course, there was a group of women, lay women, discerning if they had a vocation or not. I got involved with that, with him at first, and then he was with you at Trinity Retreat, and he handed it over to you. And I would say the greatest impact he had was the beginnings of the renewal your community, and then all of a sudden supporting us in that idea, a few of us beginning the Franciscan Sisters of the Renewal. What an influence he was, so courageous in his speaking out at a time where the church needed a voice, and he was not afraid to speak of the faith and to support the magisterium. And then the generosity, as you said before, he never stopped giving. He kept on giving, and even those silhouettes he saw out there at Trinity, he went out to them. And I saw that very, very specifically in the works with the poor in the Bronx when we finally got there.
Yeah, he did. There was always room for somebody else.
Yes.
And he always made sure that people who are hungry got something to eat.
Right.
And he'd do his best to find shelter for somebody who was homeless. And yeah, very dedicated. I know for myself too, I learned so much from him. I was working with him, but it was his spirit, his concern, And I know he did, really so much. He's helped the sisters in so many ways, hasn't he?
He has taught them, but more than that, just getting involved in just different experiences in our lives. When I was very ill in the hospital, he'd be one of the first people to come and visit me, but he visited everyone else too. And then not only that, but any request we had, the poor that came to us that needed something, he would help. But the sisters' families, he would help them too. When someone would, lose a relative, he would call, or he came to my aunt's funeral. He was just open to supporting us in every single way. I don't remember ever going to him with a request that he ever said no. If he couldn't do it, he would find someone else that could help us. And he's always supported us. So a real father image, God the Father image for us.
He was he knew so many people, and so many people knew him. I remember when we first started our community, and a priest was asking me, because I was in a gray habit. He said, "Are you a Graymore friar?" I said, "No, I'm not." He said, "You a Capuchin?" I said, "No, I had been." "Well, what community are you?" I said, "You ever hear of Father Benedict Groeschel?" "Oh, that community." Everybody knew him. I used to think, he's such an unusual person.
Yeah.
The whole world knew him. I remember I was in, where was it? I guess I was in Genoa in Italy. And I stopped at the shrine, a Capuchin saint there, St. Francis Mary of Camporoso, who I thought was a great saint. He gave his life to that God. He offered himself as a victim for the plague victims of Genoa, and God accepted that. He got the plague himself, but the plague ended among the people, so they always venerated him as the Holy Father of Genoa. But there was a friar there. He says to me, "I know only one American Capuchin." It was Father Benedict Groeschel. I said, "No matter where you go." I remember a friar who worked with him, and he went up to the Trappist monastery up in not Gethsemane, up in Massachusetts. Spencer. And he said during lunch, they played Father Benedict's tapes, and he came home and he said, "Father Benedict, I can't get away from you, no matter what I do." But he had that great impact on so many people. Well, didn't he take also the sisters out to little...
Oh yes, he was always taking the sisters out for the sisters and the friars together in vans. Well, he took us at first to Rome and Assisi, the first band in two vans. That was many stories, but and to see Pope John Paul II.
That's right.
But he would take the sisters for cultural takeaways to the cloisters or to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, or take them down to Philadelphia to the art museums there. Or he took us once to see the Messiah in Carnegie Hall. We had like nosebleed seats, but we got up there and enjoyed Handel's Messiah at Christmas time. And he's always been so kind to us. But what I really experienced mostly was our work with the poor with him. I mean, he was beyond what you could imagine. If I could just mention one
please,
story. Well, usually at Christmases, always, he had lines of people coming and helping them with give-outs and everything. But one story in particular I remember, it was late at night in the convent, and I got a call from one of our neighbors that we served, and she was in desperate straits. She had a brother who was dying, I believe, of AIDS at the time. Many of those people were dying of AIDS. And he needed a place to stay, and even though he wasn't staying with her, she said, how could I not take him in? The hospital had let him out because there was nothing more they could do for him. He was dying, and he didn't have a bed. You know, she asked for a bed, but she also asked for a priest. I knew that Father Benedict was there in the shelter with the homeless men, and I knew he would be finished about 10 o'clock, and it was around that time. And I called him up and I said, Father Benedict, there's someone in need, you know, and I told him the circumstances. Could you please go in and help him? He said, certainly, I could. And then I realized he was going to Cortlandt Avenue. Cortlandt Avenue, there are gunshots during the day. Forget about at night. And I said, oh my. I just went and I prayed because I couldn't get out. So I was praying in the chapel that nothing would happen to him. But he didn't think twice about it, going out with another person. Went over to that man and anointed him. And the next day we were bringing the bed. And when they brought the bed, they said that he had prepared this man. He had been baptized, but he had prepared him for First Communion and his confirmation. So he had his First Communion, his confirmation, and a bed, and that night he did pass away. Wow. And, you know, that's Father Benedict.
That's Father Benedict.
What do you think?
I'm sure he was greatly influenced by the example of Father Solanus Casey. Remember, in the novitiate, Father Solanus was in the novitiate community there in Indiana where he made his novitiate, where Father Benedict made his novitiate. Remember, he used to tell a story. He got up one night, he went to the chapel, and there he turned the light on, and there was Father Solanus Casey kneeling on his knees right in front of the tabernacle, completely oblivious of anything. And Father Benedict said he was in ecstasy at that point. You know. So he certainly, whatever he learned from Father Solanus, I'm sure he was passing that on to others, and his good example to all of us too, you know. You mentioned too, Sister, he told you once about
yes.
Doing his best or something?
The very last time I saw him, I had just gotten back from Ireland, and that was just about a few weeks ago. And I went over to him immediately, and we knew that it wasn't going to be long before the Lord took him to heaven. And I asked him, I said, Father, do you have any words for us? And he said, all I can say is that I've always depended on the providence of God, and I've always tried my best to do whatever he wanted. And that to me is like the ultimate, I think, in the spiritual life, to be able to do that, to depend on God and to do what God wants. So I was very, very touched by that, and very just moved by his example of generosity and courage.
Yeah, he certainly has left his mark. I mean, many people have received so much through his example, his teaching, and his prayers now, you know. Didn't they mention that the website that we had, there were so many testimonies coming in from people, how
Thousands
he had,
of them.
thousands of them, that's right,
Mm-hmm.
how he had affected their lives, you know. And again, you know, wherever you go, I mean, there was always that question, how's Father Benedict, how's Mother Angelica too, you know, and they were the best of friends, weren't they, you know? And
Birds of a feather.
that's right, flocked together. Right.
Personality.
Huh?
Personality.
Personality too, right? I think that's why they got along so well. You know, they understood each other. Well, you know, his great love. We talked before about his love of the poor. You know, we should say something about his care for the Good Counsel homes. Did you know him, Father Glenn, when he began the Good Counsel homes?
Yes, I believe you've had Mr. Chris Bell on your show, and he and Chris opened the home for unwed mothers, and I believe they have maybe 5 or 6 homes presently, and it seemed that he took what the Holy Father, Pope Francis, speaks about the respect of the person. What Pope John Paul II would always speak about, the dignity of the human person, that he respected everyone, meaning quite literally, he looked again at them, respect, he looked at them, and so he would just be able to look beyond the surface and of the person and see the center and be able to sympathize and have compassion for them. And so whether it be a young girl in an unplanned pregnancy, whether it be someone with AIDS or someone who's homeless. It could be a priest that was having a vocational crisis, or even one of us friars or the sisters. He was able to feel with us, but not only that, but to act. If I might, Father Andrew,
Sure.
just quote from we spoke about the prayer card, and when you have to sort of decide what quote from the Gospels you could put on Father Benedict's card, you could sort of just close your eyes and put your finger down on the Gospels and find it appropriate. But this is the one that was chosen. Come, O blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me. And I think that we all know that that it's not simply just the physical food or drink or clothing or the like. It's not simply just the material things, although he supplied those, but also the emotional and also the spiritual fulfillment. And so we've mentioned that all those who may want to have a copy of this card can go to the website and franciscanfriars.com and contact us, and we'll be able to send the beautiful prayer card.
Very good. Yes. So you certainly, those of you, I know so many of you love Father Benedict, you want to have a little copy of this, some card of remembrance. And as I said, those 4 things on the back, which I think were so well chosen. Faithful son of the church. I mean, he stood up for truth. He stood up for reform when people didn't want to hear that, many people, and they didn't pay attention to that. But he was faithful to the call of the church. He was a loving father of the poor. And, one of the things that strikes you when you knew him personally, he was a very fatherly person.
Yeah.
There's no doubt. I think that's why so many people gravitated to him. He was like a father, He was an ardent preacher of the gospel. And remember when Father Glenn, you would remember in the beginning of our community, he would come every week and begin to talk,
On the rocks.
Sometimes he would remind us, what to do, He was a dedicated follower of St. Francis. And, the CFR, the Franciscans of the Renewal, the community, Franciscan Friars, Franciscan Sisters, is another little branch on the tree of Franciscan life. And, we mentioned the good counsel homes for the unwed mothers and for mothers who give birth, right? And then they can leave the babies there during the day and go out to work, and those babies are cared for. But there's also the Franciscan home in Brooklyn, right? Wasn't that there? Was that?
He started that many years ago for the young men that were going out of leaving Children's Village and didn't have a place to go to, and so it was a place where they could live, and they paid a little rent, and it soon, I shouldn't say soon, but over time, it actually became the place where the grassroots renewal films were started, and under the capable leadership of Joe Campo, and it's still open and helping young people.
And he used to help to support, not the sole support, but help to support so many of these charities, Good Counsel Homes, St. Francis Home, and so many other things with our community, with our expenses, for sending brothers to studies or sending, medical expenses and so on like that. Father Benedict was, someone who worked so very hard to help support.
And he's still going to work hard to support us.
I'm sure of that. Yes. He has a way of doing it, And but he also was able, I think, to affect even non-Catholic people. They had a certain respect for him. He could really relate to people of different religions and even sometimes no religion, you know. But people, you know, Jewish people that loved him. You know, many of the people. He told me one time. He said many of the people that watch my program on EWTN are Jewish people. They respected him. You know, and that was very similar to Bishop Sheen, because Bishop Sheen and the people who watched him on television, the highest percentage of any religious group in the United States that watched him was Jewish. And I remember mentioning that to a producer for a major network, and he said to me, well, how do you account for that? And I figured this is a good time to get a couple of points in here. He told them the truth, and they respected him for it. And that, because he lived that way. That's the kind of person that he was. Well, we're not too far from the end of this wonderful program, but is there any last things maybe you want to say or share, any little anecdote or?
I guess just for me, I just remember Christmas Eve, him caring for people, giving them coats out, he always spent every holiday with the homeless.
That's right.
And just, I feel I'm going to be feeling him very close to me in the moments to come and the days to come.
Yes.
Well, at the funeral of Pope John Paul II, there was a few people out there in the huge crowd, and they had a sign, and it said, Santo Subito, which means saint or sainthood, subito, quickly or soon. And when I look at the life of Father Benedict, if someone say, well, why should he be even considered in the church as a model of holiness? And I would say, well, why not? So let's see what these next few years bring, and perhaps it will be, I'm not sure whether it's subito, but santo, certainly.
Yeah. He certainly, you know, at the cathedral the other day, I was there for the beatification of Sister, now Blessed Miriam Teresa. And many people said to me, you know, he was a holy man, so maybe someday he will be a blessed.
Yes.
And so, well, we've come to the end of our program. We're going to have to stop and say a little prayer, but maybe I'll give the blessing of St. Francis, Father, and then together we'll give
Yes.
We'll close with the blessing of St. Francis. May the Lord bless you and keep you.
Amen.
May he turn his face to you and have mercy on you. May he smile on you and grant you his peace. May Almighty God bless you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So God love you. Bye now. Well, we come to that point in our program now at the end here to make our appeal for the support of EWTN. You know, Father Benedict was a great supporter of EWTN, not by giving money, but by his programs. I mean, he was there on EWTN from the very beginning. I think Mother Angelica loved him and trusted, knew that he was always proclaiming the truth, and with a, you know, loud and vibrant voice. And it's a voice we don't want to go silent, and certainly we don't want EWTN to go silent either. Well, please do all you can to support EWTN. They need your prayers. They need your financial contributions. As Mother would say, put your donation between, what is it, your electric bill and your telephone bill, something like that. Anyway, that's where you want it to be. Give what you can, and you will be furthering the work of the new evangelization, and God will bless you. God love you all.